Welcome to CADAF Talks. We're going to talk about emotion in visual communication, and we are joined today by two wonderful speakers. First by Kate Stevenson, who is based in New York and who is the founder of Dotdot Creative Studio, creating amazing immersive experiences. And by Sabine Landolt, who is a co-founder of New 3 Plus, who has 25 years plus of branding experience, and now is launching this platform this summer, who will connect creators and brands. And I will be moderating this panel. My name is Masha Maskina. I'm the founder of Maskina Art. Sorry about it. So my name is Masha Maskina. I'm the founder of Maskina Art Ventures, which is a creative consultancy helping businesses and corporations and individuals to build art collections. Mm-hmm. So Kate, maybe if you want to start to kick it off and present yourself.
Yes, of course. Hi, everyone. My name's Kate. As Masha kindly introduced, I'm one of the founders of a creative studio called Dotdot. We're based here in New York City. And we, pre-pandemic, would say we create immersive experiences for physical spaces. But obviously in a pandemic world, that's meant we've done a lot more things back virtually online. And our expertise is really taking these new emerging technologies, these new creative ways of bringing people together socially, and doing that in playful, delightful, educational, artistic ways. So our work can be found in museums and galleries. It can be found as pop-ups, it can be found online. And a lot of people look at what we do and think that it's very hard to say we do one thing, but a lot of it comes from a background in actually in gaming and game design, although what we build does not necessarily look to the end audience or the end user like a game, but it's using a lot of those principles and technologies to do interesting, interactive, collaborative, and playful things. And so I'll just say, yeah, my background also, before I founded the studio, I come from a background in the performing arts. So I trained as a dancer. I studied that at an academic level as an undergrad, and then did my postgraduate master's studies in film directing. So I'm very interested in the intersection of the physical body, technology, and the arts. So that's kind of where I like to play. Yeah. Nice to be here.
Thank you so much for this introduction. Sabine, do you want to go ahead as well?
Yeah, hi everyone. Thank you for hosting us. It's a great pleasure, talking together about this subject. So my background is a creative background in applied art, and then I specialized in business development. So as you said, nicely and kindly, I have an extended experience in branding on the creative part, and I really specialized in visual identity. That's why I did my career in design and in fashion and luxury and mass market. And then I created my own agency, industry branding, which is all about, position the brand on the visual identity, but also respecting the cultural map and the local expectation. As everything is really emotional, you have to make it sure that you also respect, the views, based on, the population, the religions, their habits, their culture. So I did that for a couple of years. Now we upgrading that, Bernardo and I, my partner, with the New 3 Plus platform, because we strongly believe that based on the new technologies, all the AR, the VR, the effect, everything what Kate will talk about it later on, it's going to be a big challenge for the big advertising agencies. As I myself, I was really struggling finding the right resources for the right project to get out the best results. So ways. I'm completely advocating and that part. So thank you for having us.
Okay, well, thank you very much for this introduction, and we're going to speak about all of this later. So to kick it off, the first question about the definition of visual communication. When we talk about it, what does it mean for you specifically? Can this be really defined? Can we really find a definition for visual communication?
Me or Kate?
Sabine, go ahead if you want to start, and then ask the same question to Kate.
I don't overtake all the time. No, I think it's actually a really good question, because the visual communication is really going through a huge shift. The shift is on since a long time, and I think that specifically because you have so many different disciplines, it's really about connecting and interconnecting the skills and the expertise of people coming from the classic way of visual communication, but also people like filmmakers, clip makers, YouTubers, AR specialists, VR specialists, and specifically artists. So I think that's a lot. It's a really crowded place right now. And this is why the visual communication, in my sense, really evolved lately, and emotion is becoming bigger and bigger, and it's overtaking probably all the classic paragraph and keywords and by hashtags and by links and everything. So I don't know if I respond properly to your question, but I think it's really difficult to define it itself right now. It's more a concept.
Interesting. Okay, Kate, do you want to comment or add something to that?
Yes, I really like, Sabine, what you were saying around the conversation around the communication. I think that the visual communication now is not just putting something into the world, but we can have like a very public kind of two-way, multi-way conversation, and people can connect and kind of riff and send things back. So I'm really interested in that connection, that audience building, that community building around things that can encourage things to kind of shift and be remixed and repurposed and reacted to in a very public sphere, which is interesting in the context of brand today, because that is, a little bit of a space that some people are not so comfortable in. They are used to this putting something out there and that's the end. But I think now in this current world, we have this really exciting opportunity to plan for a multi-way exchange.
Right, as if it becomes a kind of a living creature, actually. Not only you put in it there into the world, but then you interact, it gives it back, etc.
Yeah, exactly.
And so Sabine, you mentioned that emotion is important. Why it is more important than ever, the emotion?
I think the emotion communication was always a key player. I think it's that the perception was different, as Kat was saying. It was the communication, the visual communication was static in the time, but now you're adding, so many different tech effects. You can add the lenses, you can add, the three-dimensional part. So it's becoming really engaging, and it's really about an interaction. And in order to interact properly and to not offend, your target or your audience, I think that the emotional part is even more important, and it goes fast. I mean, I think that also the clock speed is really different than it was at time. And I agree with Kate. I mean, this is a kind of, the corporation, the brands, or even the agency, the big agency, they have to get out of the comfort zone. And it is a kind of intimidating somehow. So I think that's why the emotional part is so overwhelming, if I can say so, that the people tend to be afraid about it.
All right. And yeah, Kate, do you want to add something to that? A comment?
Yeah, well, I think as Sabine says, emotion has always been important, but the way that we can create experiences or create exchanges that tap into that for people is really exciting with the technologies that we have available. So we are able to do things in real time and in creative ways that kind of makes things more memorable, makes things feel more meaningful. And often that happens around like collaboration and kind of socialization. So if you can bring people together through something or get people to work together through something, that becomes something that is, you know, more meaningful and, you know, is an emotional memory that keeps with them.
And also the gaming, as you said before, Kate, I mean, saying that gaming, it's still, you know, a kind of, it's not a bubble anymore. I mean, it's right there for everyone. And I think that for the brand, some of the brand really understood it properly and really jumped on the, you know, on the opportunity given from the COVID. But some other ones are still super, you know, kind of afraid about the image, about, you know, if they're gonna, it's still, I think, a struggle between getting out with the DNA linked message and jumping on new technology. So this is why the emotional part is a struggle, I think, for both sides.
Right, but we're also, I guess, also emerged now with the images. Like we're saturated, I would say, with the images and with the strong ones. So then, how do you stand out? How do you make sure that the message will be seen that you're putting out there?
I think it's a really good point, and I think that's why the narrative and the storytelling are so important. Because I mean, if you don't have, you always have to link, you know, what specifically for the brands, they have, you know, a standard point that they want to shift in a uncomfortable way, but they still, I mean, so this is why you have some brands that do that really well. Some other ones are jumping in and getting out again. It's a really kind of, you know, I would like, but I don't want, and I would like, and I don't know how. So this is why, you know, I think that narrative storytelling is important, but also I think that you need to have a kind of idea of a roadmap. What is your goal? Where you want to go? What you want to achieve? What would be the outcome? And this would probably, I'm not saying exclude any mistake, but you learn by a mistake. I think mistakes and the misinterpretation are building, you know, this new narrative up. So I think you just need to plan a little bit.
Right. And so, Kate, what do you think, like in terms of emergence of new technologies and digital art, how it is playing in the new environment?
Yeah, I think the pandemic has kind of changed the world in many ways for this, because I've seen different research studies that say that like the level of behavior change and kind of acceptance of using technologies in these virtual ways is the equivalent that would normally take 10 years or even 25 years. And that's huge change over like 12 months. And so, yeah, so also, even though technology is changing fast, the kind of willingness and the social understanding and the kind of like patterns of knowing how to use this technology is a huge factor in how we can make work and share work. And so now we've just got this massive opportunity where audiences, users have found these tools, being kind of forced to learn virtual and digital, and now can do it and are confident in it. So what does that mean for artists? What does that mean we can do now, when before, if we did something online, the audience, you know, would only be the people who understand what that means. But now we have a whole lot of people who are kind of familiar with Zoom, familiar with the idea of a virtual space. And so I think what we're going to see is like a lot of innovation in the next few years. It's not going to go back to normal. It has changed. The world has changed. And so I'm really excited about what will be created. I think we're going to see some really interesting things happen online and in a hybrid model as well. So what does it mean to have things happening physically and in this kind of real world space, but be connected or be in parallel with things happening virtually? So yeah, I think we're going to see some really interesting things come out of this time, which I'm really excited about.
Right. And so can you maybe share some ideas about this opportunity that it represents, that that in physical world it cannot do it necessarily.
Yeah, so there's a lot of conferences, virtual events, virtual festivals that have tried a whole lot of experiments over the last 12 months and gone, hey, there is an audience online alongside what I might do in the real world. And so you're looking at the likes of film festivals and all these different kinds of kind of activations that would normally really focus on the real world pop kind of angle. Go, okay, I'm going to cater for this other audience that probably feels like a secondary audience as we move back to normal, but is a valid audience that is an international audience that reaches people we never would have reached before. And now we have a community that's like, 10 times what it was before. So yeah, I've been talking to film festivals who are looking at that. I've been seeing gallery spaces that are, exhibiting art in virtual spaces as well as physical spaces and experimenting with how they represent art in both. You're seeing like music festivals, concerts, venues who've learned to live stream during the last 12 months go, hey, I've got a whole audience online who aren't in this city but love being part of this community and will join us on Twitch or on YouTube Live when we have our DJ play or this artist come and perform. So I think we're just going to see a lot more opportunity to connect people. Niche audiences online will grow. And someone the other day even pointed out to me like, hey, there's all these people, like if we look in the United States context, there's all these young adults who aren't 21, right? And right now they can live stream in from these clubs, from these venues that they can't go to. So like they don't want that to disappear. That's been like a big part of their lives over the last year. So what does it look like to actually consider audiences who did not have access previously, have been able to have access and are now going, I want more of that artist, I want more of that. So yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity across all these different industries.
Right. So
I would say something additional to that. I think that this is also saying something that, for instance, the brands, they have a way bigger megaphone right now, and they can also connect, now different disciplines together through their own discipline. So fashion was tend to be a kind, on their own world. But I think that now, I mean, you had already fashion, connected to ballet or fashion connected to operas like that. But I think that now it's really out there, and you can imagine, for instance, sitting, in an airport, and because we can fly again, right? So sitting there instead of watching the news or whatever, having a huge screen and listening to music with some headphones, and at the same time seeing the streaming connected to the last fashion show of Bottega Veneta or whatever. So I think that now it's gonna also bring a huge opportunity to the fashion brand, to the design. For instance, even Salone del Mobile in Milan, where they really are kind of freezing about the online thing, but I think they will have a visibility they never had before, and they can really reach different audiences because on all those technology, and because the people are used to now.
Right. So basically, transcending frontiers and getting in touch with the audience that you would not have had before, right? But Sabine, can you tell us about also cultural mapping and cultural differences? Because what might work in one maybe region might not work in another, like speaking of Middle East, for example.
Yeah, I think, I mean, that was always a big struggle in terms of communication and branding, because you always had to be aware that, for instance, a pre-fall collection campaign they shoot was working perfectly fine in the US, but was just not possible to stream on in the Middle East. I mean, this is what it is, and it's fine, it's perfect. This is what makes the word so rich. But I think that now that you can connect the campaign to different kind of medium, of different platforms, I think that you can play around. So you can also present, you know, a collection in different way as only presenting it on supermodels. I think that now the imagination goes way beyond the classical way of presenting, you know, these kind of things. And we have giant screens on all the facade of the malls and everything. I think those should be needed. And I think that also the advantage to respect the cultural map is that when you play on the technology, it's really easy to adapt quickly, you know, and to make it, you know, viable for the different perception, the different expectation around the world. So I think it's way more flexible, and also I think that with all the social media, with all the communications, it's easier for us to understand what works there and what would not work there. So I think that I think it's a huge shift, but it's gonna be explosive, and I think it's gonna be way better. But also, on the other hand, if you miss targets, you know, the culture map, it could be also, yeah, you can hurt people really fast, really quickly, and really intensively. So there's the pro and con, but I think it's gonna be definitely something really interesting.
Right. Kate, do you have also experience with that, with your clients, with your projects?
Yeah, I mean, I think localization and the process of understanding like the different audiences you have is super, super important. So yeah, in different ways, like we build experiences that will be certain languages. We build experiences that need to really consider accessibility in really important ways. We build experiences which might be in one country and then get kind of reworked for another geography. So I think for me, the most important thing is just making sure that that you're making the work with the people who are in that audience. So you don't come in and say, this is the way that it should be. You work with people in those communities to make sure that what you're saying and how you're saying it and how you're using something that might have been created from another context can be reworked or repurposed to be relevant. And I think if you do that right, then you know that it'll work for the community. If you come in as an outsider and think that you know best, then that won't go so well. So it's really important, I think, to be thinking about what you're building in a quite local way. In gaming, we have this role that's called a community manager, and that person is responsible for kind of like supporting and servicing the community of players of the game. And it's a very like this has been in the community for a very long time in the gaming industry. And when social media became really big, you know, online, things like that, everyone was calling these people social media managers, like in a more mainstream way. But I think the term community manager is a much better term to use, because it's not about managing the thing you're putting out there, like the media. It's about managing the people that you're affecting, that have an emotional response to what you're doing. And so I always say to people, no, what you need is a community manager. That person is like the heart and the soul of what you're doing. And that person needs to be part of the community that they're servicing and be able to kind of like have a strong emotional connection to that work. So yeah, I think there's a lot, I like to tell people working in digital and virtual that there's a lot we can learn from the game industry, even though the work that I make is not necessarily for gamers or look like a game. A lot of the things that we can learn from that industry that's been doing a lot of these digital things for a long time are so important for how we think about technology and communities going forward.
Yeah, so basically empathy and emotional intelligence are super important.
Yeah, and if I may, I think it's also really, it's not, I mean, I was talking about the fashion, but I was just talking yesterday for launch for lipstick, for instance, and the lipstick could be something really touchy as well, because lipstick goes really something really sensual, something really, you know, sexy also. So I think that when you're going out with the communication on this kind of product and you go on the new technologies, you need, I think that I wish that the big corporation have community manager, because I think this is exactly what it is. You need people who understand the people, and you also need to be an ambassador of your product, right? And if you love your product, you tend to also, you know, you're proud about it and you want to get out it, right? So you also maybe you're more likely to understand how you're going to say it there and how you're going to perceive, you know, the visual and the emotional communication that matters. So I think it's super important.
Great. So yeah, so the technologies are great, but you still need humans to be there,
definitely.
to create the right level of interaction, etc.
Yeah, it's become more curated. I think that curating, you know, curating your community, curating, you know, your medium that you're picking for the different exercises. I think this is why emotion is so important. I mean, you're never gonna, I don't believe that the human being is gonna be cut out. It's just, it's gonna be used in a different way.
Right, exactly. So art and artists, what role could they play today in creating the visual content versus if we take more traditional advertising agencies? How do you see that? How can artists be more on board actually into this realm?
Well, this is something we're strongly advocating at the News 3 Plus, so I can't be more as happy for talking about that, but I really strongly believe that. And this is why I have such a pleasure working, you know, with people like Kate or Demzhensky. I mean, this is really, I think that I really, the big struggle now in terms of emotion is also because you need to connect your emotion to the right to the right resources, if I can say so. And the classical execution is shifted. And for me, the people who have the best feeling about emotion, about, you know, talking about a specific product or subject are the artists, because the artists, they have that in their soul, they have that in there, and the artists are free, right? I mean, I was always saying, don't hire artists, it's a nonsense. An artist has to be free. An artist needs to have, you know, connect material and style, and they need, you know, having a blank page. That's the best for them. And this is why I experienced that with my own agency. I said, when I had something really specific I wanted to do, it's impossible to pick the right resources. It's impossible to find the right creative person. And also because now everything is interconnected. It's not because a sculptor, you know, is doing only sculpture that he's not, you know, able to do a kind of 3D animation about the lipstick. They know how to do that, and they have that really deeply in. And I think that I really, really strongly believe that the corporation, the agency, all those big entity, they have to dig in the digital sphere in a totally different way. And I'm really convinced that the inspiration and the ideas also should come directly from the art world.
Right. Kate, do you have a take on this one?
Yeah, I mean, as someone that works in that space, I've worked with companies and brands in both ways, through agency relationships and direct. And, you know, usually you get the more creative, the more bleeding edge, the more innovative ideas through when you're working direct with the brand, because you're able, you know what you're creating, you understand really clearly kind of like what you're trying to do, and you can talk directly to the brand, and if they're on board with kind of your work and how you show up in the world and the kind of meaning that you want to create, then they kind of trust you to do that. You know, and whereas the agency model just has many layers, so it's like you know, too many cooks at some level. You have all these layers that something goes through, and it doesn't always mean that it comes out the other side as the best form of itself. And that's not because anyone has intention not for it to be the best thing. It just becomes what everyone knows. And especially like the kind of work that we do is at the edge of innovation. We do a lot of like, is this possible type work, And so when it goes through many stakeholders up a chain, people who read about it or try to understand it don't understand it. And so it becomes what people can sell rather than what it could potentially be. And so, yeah, so we just find that we do more interesting work when we don't have all those layers. I've also experienced that sometimes we are very good at helping agencies win the work with our innovative ideas, but once the project actually has money behind it, there is a tendency to want to play safe. And there's lots of good reasons for that from an agency perspective. But, you know, it's kind of disappointing when you win the work for doing something that's really new and exciting, and for that brand or that the product will do something wow, and then it becomes something that has been, you know, you've seen before. So I don't know how to change the process. It's really about process rather than how do you change the process so that the creativity and the can bubble to the top, not be kind of shaved down.
All right. So, but it's also the question of freedom, I guess, right? Liberated from any constraints, commercial constraints, or any probably maybe money constraints. Then you're more free, and then you get more in touch with emotions, right? As well.
But I also think it's about idea. I mean, you know, it's always a battle about to have the right idea, but then you need to trust the people out there, you know, for playing around your idea. Because the problem is that, you know, the big multinationals, they tend to have just one idea that they are using and reusing and heating and reheating every time, and maybe you know, and go then, you know, to the same agency for ages. And so the good idea is maybe not the latest best idea. So I think that creating, you know, some chat, some conversation with different, you know, intervenant, different people can involve the idea. And I think that also you would probably have less of this kind of experience that Kate was just talking about. And also I think that I mean, you know, the brands don't need also all the time need to know about the messy kitchen that we have maybe on the side, because it's in the messy kitchen that you have the best stuff coming out. So I think that it's important that everybody, you know, is willing for involving, but there's also a kind of trust that yes, you can have something different. Trust them and go out of your comfort zone. And this is always kind of a little bit the difficult step.
Yeah, absolutely. I understand. And so speaking of brands and speaking of corporations and multinationals, so who are those who are using the visual communication really? Like, what do they do? Is it like fashion brands, or now it's larger than that?
I think that
everyone.
Yeah, everyone is doing it. I think that in terms of what I've seen during this last very unusual 12 months, that the brands I saw doing the most innovative things were in the fashion space. And I was trying to work out why that was. The other day after we talked, I was like, why are the best examples I keep coming up with for kind of reacting and doing something different fashion? And I think this is my theory. I think it's because fashion has to have a conversation with the human body. It has to be a conversation about like, here is something, now you're going to do something with it. It's like inherent to the product that relationship exists. And so my theory is that the reason that fashion can be more cutting edge and be more innovative is they're already used to having a conversation and used to the fact that they need to show up in the world in ways for people to react and riff on, and maybe they won't use the thing that you created the way that you want to, that you intended, but it can become something that is still relevant and still beautiful and still a personal statement that should be celebrated. So that's my theory. I don't know what you guys think, but that's what I've noticed during the pandemic, is that's where I've seen the innovation kind of come out.
Right, interesting.
I think it's a really interesting question. I thought a lot about it too after you know after our first meeting. I think it's super interesting, and also I think that yeah, you're definitely right. I mean, fashion is more an extrovert, you know, industry, so it's always had to engage with the people basically, and that's why they had the different collection. They have the different, you know, and they already did that a lot with the capsule collection by inviting different kind of designers, was, you know, for some spot or pop-up, you know, collections or designs. But I think there's still, I mean, fashion could use, I think, this kind of already exercise to go out with new messages like sustainability, eco-friendly materials, recycling, responsive retail. I think this would be really helpful. But I think that's some new industry. They're gonna be newcomers like food. I think the food industry, there's so much more awareness about nutrition, specifically from the early age. So I think that there's gonna be, I really hope so, but I really believe strongly in there that, you know, you're gonna go out with emotional message when it comes for, you know, healthy nutrition for the children, because at the end of the day, if you know how to do it correctly at the beginning, it should be less damaging when you're getting older, right? So I think that food definitely is gonna, and the US, they're doing tons of good stuff in food, but it's still a kind of niche, you know, it's not really for everyone having fun stuff with game, with it, you know, with, there's so much to do.
But food is very related to emotion as well, very connected.
Absolutely, that's why. Absolutely.
This is where the emotion is born, is in our gut.
Yeah. There's a sense, I mean, the sense of the taste and the sense of the smell, and so, and the sense also for the touch. So this is why I think that I really believe that with all the technologies and, you know, with artists and with creative studio, I really hope that the food's gonna find, you know, their own spot also in this kind of emotional communication.
All right. So what about tech companies? Because now we're speaking about this all new creative technologies. Do tech companies who are now the kings or the queens in the world, do they use the visual communication one way or the other, or should they maybe doing it more a little bit? Or, who wants to tackle this one?
I mean, that's a good question. I think that, I don't know, I kind of feel like when something becomes big, it becomes slower. And so with some of those more innovative parts of how you communicate and how you kind of put yourself out there, that you become less, you just naturally become less good at it, maybe. And that's why you see, I don't know, some of the tech companies do have like little labs inside them, which are very experimental. They often employ artists, of course, in those labs. So there's a lot of people I know have been through the likes of like Google's version of that. They bring people in, like Sabine has mentioned, there is, you know, abundance of resource, there is, you know, place and time and community to try things out, build prototypes quickly and see what kind of resonates. But at the same time, it's really hard for those big tech companies to kind of take some of those really cutting edge ideas if they're not like a clear revenue stream or a clear, like, have a clear KPI for the business. So I think it becomes difficult to be innovative once you're at a certain size. And that's also kind of the beauty of being not big, of being small, right, is that you can do that, and you can be lean, and you can be flexible, and you can be nimble, which are all the things these tech companies were when they started, and that's why they got to where they are today. So right, it's kind of part and parcel of the process, I think.
But what about, for example, like new startups who are starting up now and who can they use like some innovative ways to communicate about things, maybe about their finances or about pitch decks? I mean, is there a cool way of doing that? Or?
I think it's a really good point. You're pointing out something really sensitive, and it's funny because as I'm working, you know, with a clean tech company, so it's a startup, but they are really already big, but still being little. And for them, it's the same struggle of with other brands. I mean, they say, my audience is more, you know, a techie or, you know, a lab-based or intellectual audience on one side, and on the side have the investors, right? So we have to please both of them. So they kind of afraid about going out there as I mean, Apple did it perfectly, but if you look at the evolution of the Apple communication, I mean, they had a good idea, they stick to it, and they're using, you know, the evolution of the technology, but they're not really trying to get out of their initial idea, which is totally fine. There's nothing wrong in there. But I mean, for instance, a clean tech company, they could also go out in that way. There's nothing wrong of adding colors in clean tech. There's nothing wrong of doing animation. There's nothing wrong to going to the 3D or lenses or whatever. But I think that it's still about, it's not their comfort zone. So I think it's really about, you know, trusting someone who's going to guide them step by step in a new way to communicate and you know, to bring out their message. And I think it's complicated for the tech startup because they're in a real bubbles, and it's, you know, it's new technology is also, you know, the audience is total, it's maybe less, you know, big audience. So as they say, for them, it's really difficult how to be positioned on the market of the emotional image, in my sense.
Right. Interesting. Okay.
They should.
They should listen maybe to this talk, maybe to get inspired.
Yeah, that's a lot of fun.
Yeah. So do you have like examples like of perfect or almost perfect communication and how emotion was used? Like, can you just maybe describe us what it should or could contain and what you could target? Can you give some examples?
Yeah, if you have something.
I'm sorry, I didn't prepare for this. Let me have a think. Sabine, do you have something while I have a think?
Well, I think there's no perfect solution. I think it's really about, you know, how you deal with the outcome you're really looking forward to reach. And I also think it goes through the process. We were discussing that last day with Kate and you. I think it also, because everything is three-dimensional now, I think that while you are, you know, dealing with maybe a proposal to a brand or corporation, I think you have to let the PowerPoints on the side, definitely, and go on the demo. I mean, a demo is really the only way to get on board the brand for a good communication and to go beyond their own expectation. And I think this is a big shift because they're not used to, you know, it's so easier to send out, you know, a keynote or to send out a PowerPoint and you look at it when you have time between one meeting or the other one. I think that, you know, even though now with the Zoom, it's going to shift a little bit, but Kate and I, we have our experience with a fashion brand. We say, no, we're not going to send you something. We want you to spend some time with us and we're going to show you. And this is also a big shift. So I think that there are tons of good stuff and there are tons also of bad stuff out there. I mean, unfortunately, but I think that I don't want to name anyone, but I mean, I think that we're really ready to guide only for the good stuff coming up.
Okay, amazing. And so maybe then some examples of projects that you did that to illustrate the purpose of what we're saying now. You can share with the audience.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that we're perfect by any means. I could share, let me check. I could share some museum work. Would that be interesting?
Yes.
I'm just seeing what we have here. I can talk a little bit about process and how we achieve a certain kind of emotional communication, if that would be useful.
I think that would be very useful.
Okay. So this is a piece that's inside a museum space rather than something that is brand focused. But why I'm going to quickly talk about it is because I think it is relevant. The same process is relevant to a brand, and sometimes this part of the process is the trickiest bit to work out, which is like what is the end goal. So with this piece, the museum came to us and said, we want to create this room in the museum where people can learn about climate change, but leave feeling empowered and not leave feeling like they can't do anything and frustrated and not wanting to engage with that topic again. And so establishing at the forefront of the experience of the kind of creative process, how you want to leave people feeling is like really, really important. And it will actually drive a lot of the decisions that you make about what the thing looks like and feels like and interacts like. So with this space, we made a whole lot of decisions because of that. One, the aesthetic of this space is as if it's all made of paper. So we didn't want it to look realistic because it's a space that is a safe place to have difficult conversations. It's a place to prototype making changes in your world. And so we wanted it to feel like something that was able to be reused and reorganized and kind of like a form of space that was prototypey for your exploration. So intentionally, we used the aesthetic of paper to kind of welcome people in and make them feel like this was a world they had some control over and that it could be changed in different ways. And then we made the whole space interactive. So moving into the space, the floor knows you're there, the bushes part. If you walk up to the wall and start interacting, you can create societal community change, things that we have to do together as a group. And then as you saw in the video earlier, there was also a touchscreen plinth in the space where you can make your own personal pledge of something that you can do on your own. So the idea is that like when people walk into this space, they feel welcomed. They see that they have agency. They see that things are moving around them and that they can make change. And then we leave them slowly with ways that they can, I'll just play that video again as I talk. We leave them with ways that they can make a real change in the world. And so a really large percentage of the audience that went through this installation came away and told the museum they were going to make change in the real world after being inside it. It's not trying to scare anyone. It's not trying to preach anyone. It's just trying to create a safe space for that to happen. And because that was upfront in our design and artistic process, everything we did, we said, is this going to leave people in this emotional state? So that is, that kind of process is key kind of to how we make work.
But you see, Kate, when we're seeing that, I mean, this is something that we can transpose to any industry. You can transpose this kind of interactive experience for jewelry, for watches, for food, for clean tech, for pharmaceutical, for everyone. Because also, I think that what you're really reaching out here with this kind of project is that it is interactive and you have really little wording right and there. And I think this is so strong because every single piece on this artwork is connected to emotion. So if you think about connecting this emotion to your customers or to your users or whatever, I mean, you're going to reach that out, and it's really also easy to adapt to one culture to the other one because it's everything. If you think well in advance, the emotional expectation for the different region that you're going to reach out, I think it's way easier than, doing those super expensive campaigns with the best, model or whatever, because you still need a support of keywords, of text, of body language that you don't have in this kind of interaction. So I think this is for me the perfect example of how the visual communication should go there, because you can have it hybrid. You can have it and so different way. And I think this is really key to bring on board, you know, the people you would like to get on your
Get on board, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and often when we have that conversation with brands and companies, and I'm working a whole lot of projects right now, but I just can't talk about them, unfortunately, but they'll be good stories in a few months. But like one of the key questions that we ask is what is success for you? Like, you know, what is that thing that you want at the end of this? And sometimes people are like, don't ask that question, they don't know. But my point of view is we should work that out together before we make
Absolutely.
All right. Yeah.
Because if we ignore that,
yeah,
and we go, it's okay, we'll just make this look good, we kind of get to a point at the end where it's like doesn't satisfy anyone that it should, or it kind of like is too broad and doesn't engage anyone enough. So yeah, I love that I'm the person who was always asking why are we doing this? Why are we doing
it's easier when you have something, you know, this is all about the meeting also, no? The old way for making business proposal, I think it's gone. It's way better to make a proposal and a brainstorming with this kind of experience, because, you know, people can't, you know, they are still in the thought while seeing something. So you can ask whatever you want to ask. Maybe they're distracted and you're going to have everything you need at the end of the day, right? So I think it's, and it's also, while you are bringing, you know, brands on this kind of experience while discussing their own idea, I think that you're going through something way more creative, or instead of sitting around the table in a conference room. So I think this is a kind of, you know, this is the perfect example of the hybrid, you know, bringing on board the people and being creative and picking ideas and experience and engagement in the art world. I think you have everything there.
All right. Yeah, and it's interesting, but it's also, I guess, it's a way of creating trust as well, right? With the audience, with the viewer, right? Because so then when you're trustworthy, then this is where you get really to emotion. You can open up.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, so this is really amazing.
Trust is a big part. Trust is definitely a big part, but I think that also people really should be more open-minded. And I mean, you know, and if you do a little mistake, it's fine. I mean, you know, it's not that you're going to have a grading sheet after or whatever. I think that it's such a new way to communicate and engage your customers. And you also want to link that, because it's always a problem of budget, right? So I think it's important also to think about, in terms of money, that if you have this kind of experience, you can extend that down, you know, the social media, you can extend that even internally for internal use. You know, the big brands, they need also to bring on board their own people. This is super important also. It's not only the marketing team versus the audience. I think it's super important to educate the people, the co-workers, the colleagues internally to get on board this new shift. So I think there's so many ways that you can explore one product. So there's so many declination. It's also interesting in terms of cost, because you can recycle it and you can adapt it. And not only recycle, it's maybe not the right word, but you can adapt it in so many different ways that you have everything in one, but you get something really very, very special.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. The thing that we haven't really talked is about the social media. How would you qualify actually the social media? How did it change our ways to engage with content, to engage visually? Did it play a positive role or negative role for you? How do you see social media?
I can talk to that. I mean, I think it's mixed. I think social media, when it is thinking of the audience as a community, can be amazing. But when it is more about driving towards a specific message out without a return, it's kind of, it just becomes another place to have a megaphone. So I love it when social media is used in a way to interact with people, with fans or customers, when it's used in a way that is really genuine, authentic, and isn't trying to necessarily just tell me things. I think that's when it's used best. Yeah.
I think the social media have also a role to educate. I think that you can. It goes beyond the passive use of the social media. I think that the social media can also be used in an educative way, because you can integrate the games, you can integrate, the lenses, you can integrate so many different tools now in the social media, that it's really not only in communicating about a product towards the community, but I think it's also about, educating on some really, serious topics, or, I think it could soften some messages as well. But again, I really believe in the storytelling and the narrative. I think everything should be connected, and everything is now so interconnected that I think it's a huge opportunity. I mean, the playground is so big now. That I think it's a wonderful tool, the social media, but I think you should be comfortable with that. And I think that you should also, in this case, I think the social media is really about what you like or what you don't like, on how you would like to use it, because it's spreading out really quickly, and it goes fast. I mean, it goes super fast, but I think it's amazing. It gives a really, in terms of emotion and message, you can really, sometimes you can have entire campaign in social media, even not using one word, even with no keywords, nothing, just about image and animation, whatever. I think it took a really different place in terms of communication. It's really emotion based, and it's visual. It's more than ever visual.
Great. Kate, do you want to add something, or?
Oh, I was just going to say also, I think there's a difference between social media and media that is social. And sometimes I get caught up in which one it is, because I think a lot of social media is designed to sell us things. But media that is social is designed to bring us together. And I think the more that we move towards that, the secondary one, the better we are as a society.
It's a good one. It's a good one.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yes. So before we conclude, because we're getting to an hour, so what's next? What is your prediction? What is your, how do you see it coming in the next 5 years? I wouldn't say beyond that, because I think nobody can say what will happen, but how do you see it in the next 5 years?
I think post-pandemic, we're going to see a lot of innovation in that virtual hybrid space. I think we're going to see a lot of things happen there, and grow communities and grow audiences and grow ways to show up in the world that were possible before, but now are more mainstream. And so I think that will mean that for artists, for all kinds of people, that there's going to be new ways to kind of grow communities around their work. And I think that's super exciting.
Great. Sabine, what would be?
Well, I think we're completely in the same phase. I think that in terms of working and development, it's going to be really community based. I think that the old process with the different traditional steps and the traditional roadmap is not coming back at the pre-pandemic time. I think it's really about a multidisciplinary, process. I think it also now, I mean, we can see that the freelance world is exploding like crazy. There's no need anymore, for a creative agency having 2 people sitting in Soho with super expensive rent. So I think they also see the business model a little bit revised, and I think it's for the good. I think this gives an opportunity to work directly, with the people from the different region and virtually, and to create stuff in a different way. But I really believe that the interdisciplinary and the community way to work is the new normal now. And as Kate really said before, you need community manager. I mean, this is key, because at every level, that in every kind of structure. I mean, this is what it is. I mean, you are interconnecting communities, you're interconnecting expertise, and you're interconnecting also technology. And art has a really big part to play there, because we know that now 30 or 40% of the contemporary art is sold online in minus 10 minutes. This says a lot. So I think that, yeah, I think that the community terminology is stronger than ever.
Yeah, and the digital art also is
definitely. There's no limit anymore. I think it's that, you know, you can be a successful non-digital artist, but you can then pretend to shift in a digital project. There's no problem in that, and vice versa. You see also some digital artists, you know, giving hands on some other, you know, specifics. So I think that it's gonna democratize, you know, the whole digital. I really hope it's gonna be less intimidating, but I think that the fact that the people are gonna be freer also to work in a different way from all around the world. Time zone is just about putting the clock a little bit earlier or later. This is what it is. But I think that a lot of structure understood that you have now online classes with, you know, with some teacher from New Zealand, or you have one coming from Sao Paulo or whatever. There's no barrier anymore. So I think this is why the community is super important.
Super important. Okay, great.
Yeah, Sabine, I loved what you said about interdisciplinary, because I think that the more people can embrace that process, the stronger, the better, the more interesting the outcome. So I think, like, thinking about things from the interdisciplinary perspective is so interesting.
I'm sure it will. I mean, look just only the NFT thing, even if it's a bubble, maybe, but I think the NFT is the best example. It's you don't need to be a tech digital artist to do your own NFT. And I mean, we're working now with a museum in Switzerland, you know, for that. And this could be, you know, the NFT could be an hyphen between art and business, education. It's interconnecting everything. I think it's a super cool experience.
So many good things to come and to see now. Well, amazing. Well, thank you very much, Kate, and thank you very much, Sabine. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I'm sure the listeners will do too. Thank you very much again, and yeah, and thank you very much, CADAF, for having us.
Thank you so much, CADAF. This is another example. CADAF is the perfect example.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, and have a great day, evening, and weekend. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care. Stay safe. Bye-bye.
Bye.